Welcome back to Foodie Down Bronx. I'm your host, M, the Hungry Dominican. Our next guest is a New Yorker artist, chef, and community organizer based right here in the Bronx. She is the founder of T.prty, a sensory elixir and sweets project, connection herbalism with diaspora influenced trees. I hope I said that right. Welcome to the show, Sheena Crystalyn.
Thank you.
Hello, hello. I was like, how do I pronounce this again? And I.
It's all good. It's kind of like tomato. It gets pronounced differently.
Right.
So,
you and I actually met at the Sancochazo
yes.
a few weeks ago, and you were nice enough to. You were on camera with me. You were making some sofrito, and I kind of was in your face with a mic. I was like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
And you were super cool about that. So it's good to see you here. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Of course, pleasure.
So I have a few bullet points here. And I had just mentioned them in the intro. Artist, chef, community organizer. When do you sleep?
Oh.
How much do you do?
I actually do give myself like 1 day of rest,
Okay.
usually a Sunday or Monday, but it is a running joke that no matter where I am, if it's in the Bronx, Harlem, Brooklyn, there will be one person at an event to be like, you're everywhere. And it kind of does feel like that sometimes, but
Right.
I'm really blessed to be able to be in a multitude of communities and consistently keep flowing.
Right,
So.
right. So with that being said, tell me a little bit about yourself. I mean, again, I have all the information here, but I want the audience to know a little bit about yourself, and then we'll talk about T.prty, which I'm super interested in. So
Awesome.
please.
So for me, I really identify pretty heavy with being New Yorican, Puerto Rican, obviously, but I am third generations in New Yorican. My family's from the Bronx. I've grown up in a variety of different places around New York State. So I really identify with the aspect of just consistently traveling within New York and the many different cultures that we have. I do have a background in art and design. I started off in fashion. I purposely chose to be in hospitality. I was in nightlife. I went even further back in community hospitality.
That's so interesting.
So yeah, I'm really passionate about combining all of these lovely things when it comes to art and design with community work. I do dabble a little bit in herbalism as well. So T.prty is very heavily influenced by that.
Right.
So,
What made you jump into hospitality? Having that fashion background, I mean, that's such a hard pivot.
The
Why?
initial thing was to actually eat. Because
Fair enough.
I've always all my life, I've always loved eating. And at one point, I mean, this was a time when you could intern for free. I just wasn't as nourished as I wanted to be. So I took the leap into going back into hospitality, and, I really never turned back.
Right.
I've always still done different art projects on the side, illustrations, things like that. But I really do love the aspect of consistently being engaged with people. So that also combined with being a barista for about 4 years professionally. I did do competitions and things like that.
Very cool. You can make the art on the coffee? I mean, I know it sounds like
Yes, I can do
I sound like
latte
I'm 5 years old. Can
No,
you
no,
make
it's
stuff
okay.
in your coffee?
I can totally do latte art. Yes. But my challenge that I had, because I was fortunate enough to be a barista who also worked in a high-end restaurant, and so when I would get bored, I would just be like, what else could I make besides coffee? Because I'm not naturally a person that needs to have coffee every day.
Right.
Most of us don't actually need to have coffee every day.
Right.
So with that began my exploration in the kitchens with making new drinks, whether it was black sesame lattes, different versions of chais, things like that. And I did have a challenge with the manager. Every shift, he would be it was his challenge for a year.
Really?
And of course there's repeats, but it got me to my relationship with the kitchen was very strong in that restaurant. So I was really able to explore that aspect more with the pastry department and with the sous chefs. So that's where I picked up a lot of my experimenting and culinary background, because I was fortunate enough. I was a barista at a restaurant, but was fortunate enough to work with these departments.
Right.
So.
So you mentioned that you jumped into it because you wanted to eat, but you also felt like you weren't getting enough variety in your food. Maybe is that
well
one of the reasons?
My first stint to hospitality was being a barista, and the thing is that we all hear the term third wave coffee. It was just very limiting. Me growing up Puerto Rican, anybody that's from the Latin diaspora, there's so many different ways to make coffee and cafecitos and all these little lovely things.
Yes.
And it came to the point that when I was working at these places, predominantly coffee shops that were quote unquote third wave, quote unquote for the people, quote unquote from these countries, they never wanted to take the orders or try a recipe that was outside of their formula. So after if I had a customer coming in Harlem, an old viejito and he wants a café con leche, I'm going to make it for him.
Right.
Third wave coffee doesn't acknowledge that. They consider it an incorrect drink. So after a while, I got, a little bit tired of that. And obviously having more culinary, chances to experiment in my other jobs, I eventually dwindled from that. Right. So part of T.prty's objective in it being a brand that specializes in elixirs and sweets is to show that there's an abundance of things that you can be drinking and eating that are sweet, right? We all know what we know. We all know cakes, we all know coffee, we all know smoothies, but there's so much more that for thousands of years our ancestors have been drinking. And a lot of these recipes are still available. So that's kind of the real core of why I started T.prty.
I want to get to T.prty real quick, but before I forget, you had a Lavender Coquito that was, I believe it's still in the Bronx Beer Hall.
No. No. It only lasted one day.
Okay. Okay.
last Christmas. Yeah.
Right, but it was on tap.
It was on tap.
And it was you made it.
Yes.
And was that through T.prty or was that right before maybe T.prty started?
No, that was within the first month of T.prty. Actually, within its full conception. Right. I have experimented with that recipe the year before. My brand was called T.prty. I was at a bunch of different holistic markets throughout Uptown and Brooklyn, and everyone loved my floral infusions. And with that, at the same timing I was doing those, I had learned from my godmother the correct way to make a coquito. Right? Not saying the modern way is incorrect, but if you're thinking of things ancestrally, all you really need to make coquito is just a coconut and sugar. So with that, I was like, well, why don't I just throw some lavender in here? And it was amazing.
And people responded to it.
So people responded that well that people were like, I want it on tap. And then that's why I was on tap for only a day last year.
That's very cool, though. How has the reaction been to T.prty? Is it something that people are realizing they never knew they needed? How is the support from your community with your business?
I've treated T.prty like a experimental project in the very beginning. And even now I still kind of see it as a project. It's a brand as well. And people are very receptive to it because they just love the idea of just an intense amount of flavor coming to you. Right. And people are really open about herbalism. People are open about green eating. Most of T.prty's recipes, I don't think I haven't done one that I've done market that isn't vegan, but they're predominantly vegan. Okay. Coconut milks, cashew milks, things like that. Gluten-free when it can be, because I have a wheat allergy. So the reception's been pretty good. People push me a lot more. I mean, I push myself, but since I wear many different hats, sometimes I forget that I'm doing this, but then I come back to it all the time, and it totally works with combining everything.
So is it safe to ask that, are you a vegan?
I am not a vegan.
Not a vegan.
Yeah, but most of my best friends for the last decade have been vegan or vegetarian. So one of my main best friends, Justine, she introduced me to making vegan desserts back in 2010. We'd be in the house with the Vitamix and things like that. So even though we don't. It took a little bit of a hiatus, I never forgot, how to make almond milks, how to make nut milks, how to do all these types of different things. So I embrace it. And honestly, in infusing herbalism, a lot of these herbs do taste better when you infuse them with another fruit, nut, or herb. So the minute you put milk in it, it's going to basically, the time span of it is going to basically decrease. So there's that, and then there's also the idea of being accessible to everyone. I don't want anyone to feel left out. Absolutely. I don't get any complaints because of that.
Okay, so we'll take a quick break, and we're going to come back, and I want to talk about your flan that you brought actually over here.
Awesome.
Guys, grab yourselves a snack. Foodie Down Bronx will be right back. Welcome back to Foodie Down Bronx. I'm joined on set by artist, mixologist, chef, and founder of T.prty, Sheena Crystalyn. Sheena, let me ask you, you brought your vegan flan, which we have here in studio, and you had mentioned that you were surrounded by a lot of people who are vegan, which I'm assuming that's part of the reason you chose to dive into it. Has making vegan dishes, I mean, it hasn't clearly changed your eating habits, but have you maybe flirted with the idea of just being a vegan 100%? Or can you just not do it?
I have, and I will go a couple of days predominantly eating vegan.
Okay.
But my body, I can't fully commit to the idea. I do not eat as much, I would say, eggs and dairy as much, but it's just a little bit difficult for me. But I do think it is a positive idea to include more, vegetables and grains and things like that into
Right.
your diet. It's
Right.
just, and if we're talking about ancestral eating, that's predominantly how your ancestors eat,
Right.
like non-processed things like that. So also with T.prty as well, most of the foods that nothing is processed, everything is like organic, coconut milk,
Awesome,
everything
okay.
comes from a pure source or pure powder boiled.
That's well. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, with T.prty, it says here in the information, diaspora influenced treats, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a major. That's your menu essentially.
Yes.
Those are your offerings.
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe to people exactly what diaspora is?
Diaspora is basically you coming from another place, anywhere around the world, and moving somewhere else and starting like a new life there, right? So a lot of us in New York City, I would say predominantly a lot of us, we are of the diaspora, whether it's the African diaspora, whether it's the Caribbean diaspora, it's really common,
Sure.
Puerto Rican, Jamaican,
Mm-hmm.
so on and so forth, the Asian diaspora. So it's basically you come from another place in your DNA line, and it's a pretty awesome thing, you know, and a lot of these recipes that we still have within our cultures is because the diaspora, our grandparents, they chose to save these recipes, right? So there's a real importance and joy in that. So I always feel like as a diaspora, we should embrace all these amazing recipes that some of them have lasted hundreds and thousands, hundreds or thousands of years, you know? There's something that you should be eating, and your body does recognize DNA. So it's like, a lot of times
you do have an emotional, physical response to certain foods.
Yes, I know there's a big reason why I love coconut, you know? Like I remember having my first, Coquito icy on Fordham at like 5,
Yes.
never forgot that. But like my body was like, oh my God, yes, coconut,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's a sensory trigger, right?
Yes.
You taste something and then it just sort of connects with you, and then your brain goes somewhere and you have this emotional response to it. I mean, I always tell people, I'm like, somebody asked me once, they were like, do you have a personal Instagram page? And I was like, my food page is my personal. Food is personal.
Yes.
Food is, it takes you somewhere, especially when you connect with food that is from your native land. So you've also done menu development. Clearly, you had mentioned you were in the hospitality sector. Can I ask which menus you helped develop, or?
There were a lot of times, like, for a lot of coffee shops that I worked for in the past.
Okay.
So throughout the boroughs and things like that, it was really the beginning of me the beginning of T.prty was honestly when I would do the menu development for different shops, meaning that I was hired at the shop already, or I did some consulting for like a friend's shop or something like that, and put different things on the menu. And for that, it was mostly like, in the very beginning was experimenting with different chais, like adding more things to chais, like raspberries and like, different fruits and things like that. So I am still looking to expand in menu development if anybody needs a hand with that. So, but for the most part, I've been using T.prty as a means to, provide that service. And then T.prty also does want to expand more into catering, which I experimented with in the summer. I catered for a lot of experimental like art garden events throughout the city. So there's that.
You had mentioned earlier, you said you talked about the cafecito.
Yes.
And how you walk into certain coffee shops and they just don't do it for you. They don't acknowledge it.
Yes.
So it's safe to say that you found that sort of resistance pretty early on.
Yes, I did.
Right. and how exactly do they broach that subject? Like, how do they bring it up to you that you can't make this certain?
They would just be like, that's incorrect.
That's
or
incorrect.
The machine, if you put like that and sugar on the steam handle, like it will break the machine. Like all these really like, you know what I mean? Like,
I mean, that must have been like seriously disheartening to hear someone try to break down why you can't make something as pretty simple as a cafecito.
Yeah, but like I'm a Virgo, and like my innate nature is to be very like innocent, but like I do have a little bit of rebelliousness in me, and it was like, oh really, you're gonna tell me I can't do this?
Right.
So it was just like, from that point on of repetitively being told that this is wrong, right? When I had been trained by so many different people, there's like more than one way to like pull a shot of espresso, make a thing of cappuccino or full milk.
Right.
But after a while, I was like, this is very limiting. There's got to be definitely way more than this. And like honestly, like through the universe and stuff like that, my answers, these questions got answers by like, I'm meeting a lot of people that make tinctures, bitters, and things like that.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And there's like a huge rise of that. Of people being like, hey, there's more things that I can ingest in my body. So.
That's so interesting. As you're speaking, I'm thinking about the fact that I think a lot of us do. We go into these commercial coffee shops and we just read the menu and just accept it for what it is,
Yes.
and just grab whatever we have, and we don't acknowledge our ancestors by drinking what they drink, and
Yeah.
we ignore so much of our own culture because we're assimilating in a weird way,
Yes.
or we've already assimilated
Yes.
into American culture. Before we wrap up real quick, I want to talk about, you do workshops, and Sweetwater and Dance, the social justice market. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So if you guys want any of these treats or to like try my stuff, the next market I will be vending at will be the social justice market at Sweetwater Dance Studios on the 17th. Follow me on Instagram. I do host a variety of workshops. I'm very into Borough Thorough. Like, I'm in the Bronx, but
You'll
sometimes
go
I'm
everywhere.
in Brooklyn and Queens because they are our sisters and brothers too.
Of course.
But yeah, I do a variety of different things. Whether it's you buying my products directly, or me teaching a class, or like us being a part of like a really awesome like sensory experience. Like that's
Very
really what my main goal for T.prty is to really be an experience.
That's very cool. Before we do officially wrap up, do you find the reception of T.prty different in the boroughs that you go to? What's your more? Do you have like an ardent fan base? Do you have what's the vibe between, let's say, Brooklyn, Bronx, or Manhattan?
No, everybody likes it so far. I just think that because I do a lot of community work, a lot of it is centered around very similar-minded people with a similar
Right.
objective of us growing together as a community, right? I've yet to kind of like really expand it into areas that might be more corporate.
Right. Okay.
So that might make it have a different reaction. But
Right.
for the most part, people love it. And like I have been blessed to work with other makers that also make elixirs and things like that as well. It's
Very cool.
kind of a little bit of a niche thing. And a lot of these people that I've met come from much different backgrounds than myself. So
Right.
it's been a really interesting experience.
That's very cool. Congrats on T.prty and good luck with it, of course.
Thank you.
Guys, stay connected with Sheena on Instagram at Sheena.Crystalyn and follow T.prty to check out her mixology and sweets concept project. For inquiries, you can also email tparty1991 at gmail.com. All right, guys, that's all for the show. Thank you again for tuning in, and thank you to our guest for today for joining us. Tune in every Thursday at 6:30 p.m. here on BronxNet Optimum 67, FiOS 33. Also tune in on the go at bronxnet.org and find clips of the show on YouTube. From BronxNet to the world, this is Foodie Down Bronx. I'm your host, the Hungry Dominican. Remember to feed your mind, feed your body, and if you see me coming along, feed me. Adios.